Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out on a beautiful, what day is this? Wednesday afternoon. It's a real honor to be here. It's an honor to speak before such a distinguished audience, and which includes many of my distinguished colleagues and friends. I'm not happy that it took me 10 years to write this book, but to some degree it was a labor of love, because I've always been interested in how elections and parties have shaped America's constitutional democracy. And the 1912 election was one of those rare campaigns that challenged voters to think seriously about their rights and the Constitution. It was the climactic battle of the progressive era that arose at the dawn of the 20th century, when the country first tried to come to terms with the profound challenges posed by the Industrial Revolution. Now, the 1912 election was not a major realigning election or a refounding, as I sometimes call them. It wasn't like the Revolution of 1800, the election of 1860, or the election of 1936. It wasn't that decisive. But it was a critical prelude to the New Deal. And more than this, it was a contest that initiated important changes that redefined the meaning and the practice of self-government in the United States. As Joe just suggested, the election showcased 4 impressive candidates who engaged in a remarkable debate about the future of American politics. Theodore Roosevelt, the protagonist of the book, who bolted from the Republican Party and ran as the standard bearer of the Progressive Party, as he famously put it, the Bull Moose campaign. William Howard Taft, the incumbent Republican president, who defends conservatism in this election. Eugene Debs, the labor leader from Terre Haute, Indiana, who ran on the Socialist Party ticket at the high tide of socialism. And finally, of course, Woodrow Wilson, the Democratic governor of New Jersey, who was elected president. He had a PhD in history and political science. They were merged at that time. The only PhD to become president of the United States, and the campaign put a lot of emphasis on his academic credentials. A September issue of Life magazine, a very popular magazine at the time, depicted Wilson as a Roman consul with the owl of learning sitting nearby. And it celebrated him in Latin as an executive, a teacher, and a spokesman of the people. I think that says it all. All 4 candidates acknowledged that fundamental changes were occurring in the American political landscape, and each attempted to define the progressive era's answer to the question raised by the new industrial order that had grown up within the American constitutional system. In particular, each candidate tried to grapple with the challenge of the trusts, with the emergence of corporations, the concentration of economic power, which posed fundamental challenges to the foundations of the decentralized republic of the 19th century. Now, that the 1912 election registered and inspired fundamental changes in American politics suggests the importance of the Progressive Party. It represented the vanguard of the progressive movement. It was joined by an array of crusading reformers who viewed Roosevelt's campaign as their best hope to advance a program of national reconstruction. Not only was it the driving force of the election, not only did it dominate the agenda, but with the important exception of the Republican Party of the 1850s, it was the most important third party in American history. With the celebrated former President Roosevelt as its candidate, the most important figure of his age, the Progressive Party won over 27% of the popular vote and 88 electoral votes. This was extraordinary for a third party. No third party candidate for the presidency before or after 1912 had received such a large percentage of the popular vote or as many electoral votes as TR did. In fact, had the Democrats not responded to the excitement aroused by TR and the Progressive Party and nominated their own progressive candidate, and Wilson only got the nomination on the 46th ballot, Roosevelt might have been elected to a third term in 1912 as the head of a party and movement dedicated to making America over. As it was, the Progressive Party pioneered a new form of modern politics, explicitly defined as modern politics, one that would eventually displace the traditional localized democracy shaped by the two-party system, which had dominated representative government in the United States since the beginning of the 19th century. Many characteristics of our politics, which are conventionally understood as new or as of recent vintage, were born of or critically advanced by the Progressive Party campaign of 1912. Having been denied the Republican nomination in spite of trouncing the incumbent William Howard Taft in the primaries, this was the first primary contest in American presidential politics, TR bolted the Republican Party. Then, as he put it in his confession of faith at the Progressive Party convention, he stood at Armageddon and he battled for the Lord. TR was always very modest. He was drawing support and inspiration from the social gospel movement. This religious language was no accident, whose members saw the Progressive Party as a political expression of their commitment to promote Christian social action on earth. It was, if you will, a religious left that was very important at the beginning of the 20th century. Roosevelt and his fellow Bull Moosers, drawing support from the social gospel movement, defined the Lord's cause as a new idea and practice of democracy. TR's crusade made universal use of the direct primary, a cause célèbre. At the time, because of TR's promotion, 12 states selected their delegates for the convention through the direct primary, but most still chose them through the party caucus, and party conventions were still dominated by state and local party officials. He also assaulted traditional partisan loyalties. He championed candidate-centered campaigns, in fact, a direct relationship between candidates and public opinion. And he took advantage of the centrality of a newly emergent mass media. There was not television yet, but there were independent newspapers, popular magazines. Movies were very important, and the movies were silent, but there were audio recordings that were very central to the campaign. And finally, he convened an energetic but uneasy coalition of self-styled public advocacy groups. 1912 was the first presidential election in which African Americans and women played an important part. All these features of the Progressive Party campaign of 1912 make the election of 1912 look more like that of 2008 than that of 1908. Now, this is not to argue that, because there may be some historians here, so I have to be honest about it. This is not to argue that so-called modern politics was created out of whole cloth in 1912. This is a culmination of sorts. It begins much sooner. For example, the candidate-centered campaign first became important in American politics in 1896, when William Jennings Bryan, the great commoner, was the first presidential candidate to campaign throughout the country. And he did so by train, and the whistle-stop tour became a staple of American politics after that. But what's different about the Progressive Party was it posed a systematic attack on political parties and the critical role these organizations had played in American elections and government. It championed instead a reconstructed modern politics centered on the presidency as the leading instrument of American democracy, the steward of the public welfare, as to use TR's beguiling phrase. As a party that embraced and went far in legitimizing new social movements and candidate-centered campaigns, the Progressive Party animated a plebiscitary form of popular rule that evolved over the course of the 20th century and appears, for better or worse, to have come into its own in recent elections. Both Barack Obama and John McCain channeled TR in 2008. In fact, I describe Barack Obama in the last chapter of my book as the apotheosis of progressive democracy. I confess I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it's we can talk about it. But it seemed to make sense. In fact, of course, neither McCain nor Obama would have won their nominations were it not for the primaries and caucuses, where rank-and-file voters and party activists choose the candidate, not elected officials and party veterans who dominated the political process prior to 1912. But Roosevelt's campaign as the Progressive Party candidate went beyond reforming the political process. It was rooted in a belief that the constitutional structure of American government, with limited federal power and a judiciary striking down economic regulations as violations of natural rights,